amino acids are nutritionally essential and must come from your diet. So of those 22, you have to eat 9 of them. Your body cannot make them fast enough to put them in that pool so that you have Lego blocks to pull out for fingernails or hair or eyelashes or whatever, okay? So again, your enzymes break it apart, your dietary protein breaks it into those amino acids absorbed from your intestines to deliver your free proteins and synthesis. Okay. So, from your body pool, so that body pool of Lego blocks, it's going to make your proteins. Your body energy comes from the proteins, about 12 to 20%. So here's where I'm going from this. You know you need protein, correct? 9 of the essential amino acids must come from your diet. Your body cannot produce them fast enough, okay? So if we are looking at your total protein number, your doctor's giving you a total protein number, do you understand that by that total protein number, he can determine what your nutritional status is? Because if you're not eating well, you're not putting amino acids into that body pool, you're not building protein. Therefore, your number will be decreased. So if you have somebody, say, in a nursing home, or somebody who's being tube fed, or somebody who's just on that vegan diet that only eats apples that fell off the tree, okay? If your total protein number is low, they can tell you that you're not eating well. Make sense? Okay, so that's an essay question on this test. You have to tell me the correlation between an amino acid, the nutritional status of a patient, and their total protein number. Okay? So what you could say, the total protein number would be decreased in a patient who is not eating well because 9 essential amino acids must come from your diet. However you want to write that in like a 2 or 3 sentence thing. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So your total protein number could determine your nutritional status because 9 essential amino acids must come from your diet to build your protein. I probably said that totally different words, but that's kind of where I'm going with that. Yes,
so
ma'am?
What are those like foods that you have to eat that, or is that coming up, or like what are the foods that have the amino acids you're missing? Is it like?
Well, it would be, like, I mean, they're always telling you like nuts and things like that. Meat, protein.
Oh, so it's more in meat than it is?
Yeah, well-balanced diet.
Okay.
If you're just eating the apple that fell off the tree, you're not going to get the protein that you need.
Gotcha.
So it's just well-balanced diet.
So by that definition, if you're vegan, you're not healthy.
So total protein. The total protein decreased in a person not eating well because 9 proteins come from your diet out of the 22. Amino acids.
Amino acids that build your proteins must come from your diet. Yes.
Come from your diet.
Out of the 22 amino acids needed to build proteins.
Correct. And I mean, I'm not saying it has to be those exact words, just as long as I can understand, you understand that some amino acids you have to eat, your total protein number will be decreased. So amino acidopathies. These are rare inherited disorders. Most of these you're going to talk about with gene and urinalysis. PKU, phenylketonuria. It is a deficiency in phenylalanine. If you drink diet soda, read the little note at the bottom that says attention phenylketonurics. You shouldn't be drinking that because that aspartame or aspartame or whatever can cause problems with this. These people are deficient in an enzyme that will break down the phenylketone, right? Therefore, if you can't break it down, kind of like if you can't put your garbage in the garbage disposal to tear it apart, your sink's going to get full, right? So it just builds up and it can cause brain damage over time. Okay. There are 7 inborn errors of metabolism, amino acidopathy, that they test babies for that mom has no say-so over. They're just going to come get your baby out of the nursery, they're going to draw your blood, and they're going to send it to the state. There are 7 inborn errors of metabolism. By determining what these inborn errors of metabolism are, they can make either dietary changes or medication changes or something while the baby is little, because otherwise they're going to have mental problems when they get to be teenagers. Okay? It was in legislation a couple years ago to increase that number to 20. It did not pass, however, because one of the markers was a DNA marker. And some politician said, no, that just means you're going to have everybody's DNA in this great big huge computer in the sky, and that's an invasion of your privacy. So it didn't pass. So we're still back to our 7. And I was watching TV last night, and are you noticing more and more of these companies are saying, oh, just spit in this tube and send us your DNA, and we're going to tell you what your background is and who's your mama, right? So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, going, so these people are voluntarily giving their DNA, right, to that big computer in the sky. So why can't we do it for children if it's going to save their life? So, I don't know. Barb's on her soapbox. But anyway, so it kind of makes you wonder, if I send them my DNA so they can tell me where I'm from, what are they doing with my DNA once they've got it?
That's the only reason I haven't done it.
Kill anybody and then smoke a cigarette out their door, but you know what I'm saying, yeah, anyway. So phenylketonuria, again, we do a PKU screen on babies, and then we just keep their diet low in phenylallanine. So you guys that are pregnant and those of you that are going to be pregnant aren't chewing diet or sugar-free gum and you're not drinking diet soda, anything, because you don't know if your unborn child has this condition.
Diet soda anyway.
I'm just saying. And for those of you who are going to have children. Alkaptonuria, that has everything to do with your homogenistic acid. And again, you're going to probably talk about this one more in urine because it does cause your urine to darken upon standing. So it's probably going to be something that she'll be talking to in your analysis. And that's a tyrosine problem. Maple sugar urine disease, branched chain alpha keto decarboxylase enzyme deficiency. Say that one 10 times fast. Go ahead and highlight that because that is a test question. These people, their urine, the branched chain alpha keto acid decarboxylase enzyme deficiency. And a student actually came up and told me, said that was on our registry exam. So that's why I leave it in my notes and that's why I leave it on my test.
No, my baby doesn't have that. Had the genetic testing done. Doesn't have that.
The PKU testing, if you maybe failed to do the second round of it and the state harassed you a little bit, but didn't let you know that your child wouldn't have problems till they were older, can you have that done at any time?
That would be a question for your physician. I don't know.
Instead of just at newborn stage?
I don't know. It is important that you do not do it before the baby. The baby actually has to have been exposed to like breast milk and things like that before you do it, because that is what kind of kicks it in. But I don't know at what point. I don't know. That would be a question for your doctor. I wouldn't know that one. I've never heard of round 1 and round 2 though. So that has to be.
I can remember when my first son was born that they tested him for that, like as soon as he was born. And so I didn't think anything of it because I'm like, well, of course.
They usually do that before you can go home.
Yeah. Yes. And then I got a letter from the state that said they wanted it to be retested. But I never retested it because he was perfectly healthy. But it didn't say, well, he's going to be perfectly healthy until he's older. So
yeah, so if they want it retested, it could be as simple as the specimen wasn't any good. It could also be that there was a problem that we want to double check.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I would probably go to my doctor and say, okay, now I understand, and should
I'd
be
like to
tested
know.
for that. Yeah, should be tested for that. So yeah.
He's already crazy. He doesn't need more problems.
Okay. With the maple syrup disease, again, you're going to probably get this in Jean. I'm sure is going to talk about it. These people have a very sweet, burnt sugar kind of smell of their urine. Back in the day when I did urinalysis, we had to report the smell. We had to actually smell it and report the smell. You had certain odors you could give. Did it have a fresh smell or a skunky smell or and so again, a sugar smell. It's something we technically had to report. Of course, that was like, back in the Stone Ages when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But anyway, so we don't.
You didn't have to taste it, did you?
I'm sorry?
You never had to taste it, did you?
No, that was way before my time. You guys do know that doctors used to do that way back in the day, was to test it for sugar, yes. Homocystinuria, we can treat that simply with diet and vitamin B. It's a deficiency in enzyme, whatever that one is, so yeah, homocystinuria. And again, you're going to talk about those. And I think what you need to know from me for homocystinuria is that you treat it with vitamin B, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll go over that again on review day. I think that's, but again, a lot of these kids are urine, are going to talk more about them in urinalysis and urine. That is what's kind of nice about having urinalysis and chemistry at the same time, because we do tend to double duty on a couple different things. So anyway, protein structure, amino acids are linked head to tail. Polypeptide, one or more than 4 amino acids joined together. Exciting there. Okay, so proteins. It's a complex macromolecule. More than 40 amino acids. Okay. The elements that they contain: carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur. Nitrogen is the one you need to know. Proteins are different than a lot of the other molecules in your body simply because they contain nitrogen. You're going to have another lecture on non-protein nitrogenous substances, which is your urinalysis. Okay? So if proteins contain nitrogen and other substances don't, would it not stand to reason that if I took your blood and I was able to cleave off the nitrogen and measure the nitrogen content, I would get a good idea of what your total protein is?
If you knew the ratio of nitrogen to protein.
I'm sorry?
If you knew the ratio to nitrogen to protein.
If you knew that ratio, exactly. Okay. So that is the basis for the reference method for total protein. We're going to cleave off the nitrogen, we're going to measure the nitrogen content, and that's what's going to help us determine your total protein, okay? Which we'll get to in a minute. So general functions of your proteins, you need for proteins. Transport, we've already talked about albumin as a transporter. What one thing did I already say albumin transports? Talked about it yesterday. Takes it from the spleen to the liver and turns it into
Bilirubin?
bilirubin, yes. Okay. Antibodies, buffers, coagulation, structure, all that, hormones, whatever. We can read through those. That's pretty exciting. Okay. Almost all plasma proteins are synthesized in the liver. Okay. That means it takes those amino acid Lego blocks, puts it together, and makes proteins. Immunoglobulins, which is what you're probably learning about in serology, right? Your IgA, M, E, and B, all right, are produced by plasma cells in your immune system. Your liver will break down your amino acids, and when it does that, it produces ammonia. The ammonia is converted to urea in the liver, and then how do you get rid of your urea waste? How do you get rid of your urea waste?
Goes to the kidneys and then pee.
You got it. You got it. So ammonia is converted to urea, and then it's converted, and you pee it out. Yep, you got it. That's exactly right. Primary, secondary, tertiary structures. Something I'm sure you don't know, but what I do need to make.
Yeah.
the denaturization of your protein. That is important to us in the laboratory. If our machine is running at 37 degrees, which is body temperature, and our proteins are fine, we can measure our protein. But if our laboratory is extremely hot and our machine is running really hot, what is that going to do for the integrity of our specimen if we're looking for total protein?
It's going to break the proteins down.
Sorry?
It's going to break the proteins down.
It's going to break them apart. It's going to denature them. Then will I be able to use my method to measure my total protein? So do you understand how temperature of an instrument, temperature of the room in the laboratory is important for the things, not just protein, but there are going to be enzymes that we'll get into later too. All right? Okay.
Are there ways to correct for that?
I'm sorry?
Are there ways to correct from that? Say you have to be in a hot room or a hot area. Are there ways to correct for temperature?
Laboratories should stay it's about 65 degrees. And yes, if there is a problem and the temperature is off, your machines will not run.
We didn't have that problem, but we had a fan that did work yesterday. We didn't have that problem.
The problem with that is they have too much in one room.
Yeah.
That's the problem with ours. They have too much in one room. But it is a problem. So proteins are something that temperature would denature. When we talk about enzymes, that's going to be a big one. All right. Conjugated proteins. So when you have a protein bound to a second substance, conjugated proteins, okay? Lipoproteins, we've already talked about lipoproteins. Your HDLs and LDLs and all that good stuff. Metalloprotein, ferritin, ceruloplasmin, hemoglobin, okay? Ceruloplasmin is copper, and you'll get that in minerals as well as with iron. Glycoproteins, haptoglobin, anti-1, antitrypsin 1, we'll get to that one in just a second. And then your other ones as well. It is when a protein is conjugated or bound to another substance. Okay, so all about the SP. Albumin, alpha 1, alpha 2, beta, and gamma. So this is your protein. This is your total protein. Okay, SPE. So pre-albumin migrates in front of albumin on the SPE. So if this is albumin, your pre-albumin is here. Make sense? Okay. Your pre-albumin is a transport mechanism for thyroxine. So thyroxine is T4, triioda whatever is T3. Transports retinol, which is vitamin A, which you need for, what do you need vitamin A for? Your vision. Okay. It will be increased in alcoholism or chronic renal failure or steroid use. So your pre-albumin level will be increased. Decreased in hepatic damage, inflammatory response to tissue necrosis, and again, for nutrition, right? So that's your pre-albumin, that's before albumin. So then albumin, which is the largest fraction of all of them, 3.5 to 5.2, highest concentration, synthesized in the liver. The main job of your protein, albumin, has many jobs, but the main one, on-caudate pressure, keeps fluid within the vascular components. If you do not have enough albumin, you will puff up. You'll be a puff, you know. It will out. So if you are edematous, puffed up, they can give you an infusion of albumin, and albumin will literally draw the liquid out of your tissue, out of your system.
Is that considered a water pill?
No. Diuretic, that's something different.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah, that acts on the kidneys. Okay. Burn victims lose albumin very quickly. So they are usually one of the ones that need an infusion of albumin as well. All right. Again, albumin, we already talked about it, binds your bilirubin, your calcium, cortisol, fatty acids. Increased in dehydration, decreased in several cases. Again, renal disease is number one. Have you learned in your analysis that albumin is a small, of the proteins, it's a smaller one? You know about your glomerulus, right? And so albumin can be lost in glomerular filtration. Okay, so that's number one cause is renal disease of losing your albumin. Why would dehydration cause an increase in your albumin?
Because the water's.
So it's a relative increase, right? You're exactly right, because your water is a relative increase.
Okay.
Just kind of like with dehydration in your hemoglobins, correct? Okay. In the alpha-1 fraction, alpha-1 antitrypsin, it's an acute phase reactant. You're going to learn about acute phase reactants in serology. That's more of a serology thing than chemistry. So neutralizes, it's in PMNs, polymononuclear neutrophils. Okay. So how would an alpha-1 antitrypsin value give me any information on an infection or anything like that? Would you expect your reaction, your value to be increased during an infection or acute phase reaction? Because it is associated with your PMNs, yes. Alpha-1 fetoprotein, AFP, we talked about that a little bit as a tumor marker. Alpha fetoprotein is also a screening tool for neurotube defects in unborn children. Can be seen, decrease can be seen in Down syndrome. So they tend to test moms, what is it, about 28 weeks? 26 weeks? Do they test you before that now?
For what?
Alpha fetoprotein for your neurotube and your Downs and all that? I don't know.
Now it's a special, you have to request it.
Oh, they don't do it, just routine?
I thought I did mine at like 19.
I know it's real touchy, and I don't remember exactly the dates.
It was like 2 phases. You're supposed to get it done before 20 weeks.
Is it before 20 weeks?
Before 20 weeks.
Yeah. So anyway, and that's fine. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to tell you, what you're going to do with the result, but they can tell you anyway. So, neural tube defects, alpha fetoprotein. Tumor marker. Haptoglobin. So now we're in the alpha-2 fraction. Okay. Haptoglobin. Talk about haptoglobin in hematology? I think you did. You had to, yeah. So haptoglobin, again, if it's decreased. So what does haptoglobin do? What is the job of haptoglobin?
Is it really removing globin? Or binding to
Removing
globin?
free hemoglobin from your blood, correct? Okay. Because what does free hemoglobin do to your kidneys?
Damage.
It can damage your kidneys, exactly right. So haptoglobin is protein that will remove free hemoglobin from your blood, right? Okay. So again, it increases and decreases. Ceruloplasmin is an albumin with copper bound to it. Copper cycles through your body. It has to be bound to a protein. So ceruloplasmin is the copper portion. If anybody's looking for a really cool disease state and they just don't want to do the average, normal, everyday one, you can do Wilson's disease. You have a decreased serum copper, and then there's also Menkes kinky hair syndrome. It has a lot of extra copper as well. So if you're just looking for a really abnormal one to do, you can do those. That again has to do with your copper level in your blood and whether or not it's sedentary. We are going to talk a little bit more about both of those actually when we talk about minerals in your trace elements. Macro 2, so again in your alpha 2 fraction, let's see, nephrotic syndrome, nothing major there. Transferrin. Transferrin is, and you've probably learned about this in hematology as well, that's your iron. Yes, that's one that binds your iron. Exactly right. So transparent is your iron transport. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we're doing macrominerals as well. Your globulins, lipoproteins, transport in the LDL cholesterol. Beta microglobulinemia is part of the HLA complex. This one has to do, they measure this one for HIV because it'll give them a good marker for your lymphocyte changeover with HIV. This one they use for that one. And I do not know why this pathway is like this. I did not do this on purpose. I must have been told. Okay, so complement. I talked about complement in coagulation. Okay, complement. Fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is a clotting factor. It is a protein, right? But what is the difference between serum and plasma?
The clotting factor.
Exactly. We are doing a serum protein electrophoresis. This is a serum protein electrophoresis. If I got a specimen from another lab to do an electrophoresis, and they gave me plasma instead, it's going to show up on my pattern, correct? So I am going to get a spike right in here. Okay. It's going to tell me they gave me plasma instead of serum.
Right, in between the alpha and the
Get a spike right in there. Okay. So when you have a test question that asks you, how would, if you were performing an SPE, how would you know that the specimen was plasma instead of serum? You would just simply tell me there would be a spike on the electrophoretic pattern. Okay? And if you ever turn that out to a pathologist, he'd yell at you. Not that it would be your fault, but. Again, a serum protein electrophoresis, not plasma. C-reactive protein, again, you're going to talk about this in serology, and that's an inflammatory, for an inflammatory disease. C-reactive protein. Again, an acute phase reactive kind of thing. High sensitivity CRP. So you have a C-reactive protein that the doctor will run if they thinks the patient is having some kind of an infection or some kind of a process going on. A high sensitivity CRP is used as a cardiac marker. Okay, so it's really easy to get them confused. So in the lab, you got to be careful. Is it a CRP and they're looking at infection, or is it an HS CRP and that's because they're looking as a cardiac marker? So that's kind of one of those things when we start talking about cardiac enzymes. You have a BNP and you have a BMP, so it's a little confusing. So again, C-reactive protein and high sensitive CRP. Cardiac
and CMP. Oh yeah, those are two same tests. No, BMP and
BMP and BNP.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay when it's written, but when the nurse calls down and says, "What's the report?" You're like, which one are you asking about? Your immunoglobulins. Again, more of a serology question. I will ask you one question about your immunoglobulins. And so you know it says gained, right?
Mm-hmm.
You gonna know that easy way to remember? G-A-M-E. Immunoglobulins. It's an easy way to remember which one's which. I am not going to ask you any specifics over which ones are which. That's all serology. When you get to blood bank, in blood bank we will talk about IgAs, IgGs, and IgMs, and those will be the only three we will really worry about in blood bank. But in serology you're going to learn all about all of them. For me, that's the one thing you got to tell me. Miscellaneous proteins. Myoglobin and troponin are proteins, but we are going to talk more about them as cardiac markers, okay? Most of the cardiac markers that we're going to deal with are enzymes, but these two are proteins, okay? So myoglobin and troponin. And again, we'll talk a little bit about them more as cardiac markers than as actual proteins. I'll tell you the difference of all of them and when they increase and decrease and all that good stuff. That'll be in that lecture rather than this one. BNP is a marker for congestive heart failure. So that's what we're saying, BNP. And then BMP, basic metabolic panel. So that's where the confusion there. Fibronectin is used as a nutritional marker. Fetal fibronectin is, back in the day when we wanted to determine fetal lung maturity, we would do a fetal lung maturity test. Now they have determined that this fetal fibronectin is much more specific and tells us much a clearer picture on the maturity of the baby, whether or not we can deliver the baby early. So fetal fibronectin helps for premature deliver. And then amyloid helps differentiate Alzheimer's disease from other forms of dementia. It's another miscellaneous protein that you'll see tested for in the lab. Okay, so what are we going to do in the lab? Total protein analysis. You're going to do total protein today, and I left it down there. You're going to do total protein. The reference method is the Kendall method. And again, this is the method where you have to cleave off that nitrogen and measure that nitrogen. Refractometry, that's the bending of light. That's like the refractometer that you guys did today with your urinalysis. Biuret method is just another method that we can use. Albumin. Albumin is dye binding. That's the Brome-Kressel green or the Brome-Kressel purple. You remember we did the Brome-Kressel green yesterday. Yes, dye binding. So that's for the albumin fraction. Keldol is for the total protein. Albumin is dye binding is for albumin. We can give the physician an albumin globulin ratio. It's just simply dividing the albumin by the globulin. Okay. What you're going to need to do on your quiz is this total protein minus albumin gives you the globulin fraction. So yesterday you did an albumin and I told you to write down your number. Today you're going to do the total protein. So you're going to take the total protein number that you get today, subtract the albumin that you got yesterday, and you're going to give me the globulin number. In the lab, we don't measure globulins as a separate entity. We simply do the calculation. Okay, then the machine actually does it. Lipemia can affect total protein analysis. So what are you going to do to get lipemia out of the equation?
Serum replacement.
I'm sorry?
Serum replacement?
No.
Centipede?
You put it in a little bullet, if you will, and you centrifuge it very fast, which causes the fat to float to the top, and then you're going to go to the bottom and pull out your clarified specimen.
And that's because we still need the serum.
Ultracentrifugation. Remember we talked about that?
Mm-hmm.
Total protein can be very falsely affected by lipemia, and that's how you're going to get it out of your equation. So that's going to be a question actually on your quiz today. Electrophoresis, again, separating out your proteins in electrical field, okay? You have to use a buffer. You have, and I know some of you had a picture. It's a gel on a plastic sheet, and you literally put it in a buffer solution, and that buffer at a pH of 8.6 makes the proteins have a net negative charge. You apply a current, and the proteins migrate. Okay? So that's a lovely lady who is setting up her electrophoresis specimen. What she's actually standing at is a densitometer. When you electrophorese your specimen, okay, this is what you're going to get. This is your gel. You have applied your sample, and then you've applied an electric current, and it has separated out your proteins. And you get bands on your gel, okay? You always do a control before and always a control after. And then these are your patients in between, okay? So that's what you get. Now, if you were to say, okay, doctor, here's your results, would you know what your albumin and your alpha 1, alpha 2, and all that good stuff is? No. So you have to put it on a densitometer, which is the machine she's standing at. And what that densitometer does is it reads how heavy those bands are on that gel, and you get your electrophoretic pattern. Okay? So here's your gel. And then it basically will then give you that SPE pattern. So what you have to do when you do an electrophoresis, again, you said you put a control at the beginning and a control at the end. And then you get your scan of your control. And then you literally lay your control value over your patient so that you know where to make your marks to stop the measuring process. So you kind of have to layer your control over your patient to make, because you know what your control value is, right? So you know what your known is. So if your known albumin value, let's say, is 5, you know you have to wiggle this line to get that value to say 5. And then you're going to wiggle this line to get that control in. And then once you have that control based on that SPE pattern, you would then lay this over any patient, and then you would know what to cut off. Okay, that's how the patterns work. That's how electrophoresis works. Okay. So you have your positive, your negative. You actually, this is the spot in which you are going to add your sample. So this is the point of application. Okay, and then your proteins are going to migrate this way. So which ones migrate the fastest?
Albumin.
Yes. Prealbumin actually the very fastest, right? Okay, so globulin, alpha 2, alpha 1, or I'm sorry, beta, alpha 2, alpha 1, albumin. So it's going to migrate in this direction, so your albumin is going to go the fastest. So the thing about it is albumin being small, it's just going to travel fast. On your test, you are going to have this pattern, just like what you had in the sheets that we did. And there's going to be a couple of them, and it's something you're going to have to do. So what you're going to have to do for me is looking at your SPE pattern. You're going to tell me which end was negative and which end was positive. You're going to tell me the point of application, and then you're going to label the 5 peaks.
So you won't want prealbumin on there?
I'll show you what I'm So basically, you're going to have a pattern on the test. You're going to tell me the point of application, which is negative, which is positive, and then you're going to label the 5 peaks. That's what you have to do. It's 7 points, 8 points, 8 points. Again, albumin travels the farthest in your alpha 1, alpha 2, beta, and gamma, which we've seen before. You're going to stain it with Poncho S, that's the stain that you use, and then again scan it in the densitometer. Nothing exciting there. So these are the ones we went over yesterday. So you are going to have these, so they're the same patterns we went over yesterday. So you're going to have, I'm going to pick 4 of the ones that we did, and you're simply going to see the exact pattern, and you're just going to simply match what it is to that pattern. You do need to know, so that's severe hepatitis. With the cirrhosis, not only are you going to match up the pattern, but I also have a test question about the cirrhosis pattern. Remember, that's the one that you have that big bridge between the beta and the gamma that is significant for cirrhosis of the liver. So that's the beta-gamma bridge. After you do your SPE, right, your serum protein electrophoresis, that's when your gamma fraction is elevated, increased. That's when you're going to hand it over to the person who's going to do the IFP. Okay? Remember we talked about that in the instrumentation. Okay? Immunofixation. So you do it after the SPE. What is in the gamma fraction of your SPE? proteins are in there. In the gamma fraction, they are gamma globulins, which are your
Antibodies.
You're gamed, yes, yes. So on the one that we showed you, I go back. Okay, with the monoclonal gammopathies, that I told you to note this one. Okay, it's in the gamma fraction. You have a spike. Okay, which means you have a monoclonal. You have a one antibody that just kept going and going and going. You have a whole bunch of one kind of antibody. Okay, again, IFE, after you've done the SPE and the gamma fraction is elevated, you're looking for your antibodies.
And those the IgM antibodies that were present in the gamma, or we don't know yet?
Do what, I'm sorry?
That's the IgM antibodies that were present in the gamma section, or
You don't know.
we don't know
You
yet?
just know you have an increase in one of them. Total protein abnormalities. Hypoproteinemia means you've lost protein from somewhere. Again, nephrotic syndrome. Lose it in your kidneys. Hyperproteinemia, usually an excessive gamma globulin, so an increase in your antibodies, right? Dehydration just makes it relative. Multiple myeloma, you have a monoclonal protein. Again, multiple myeloma, you're going to talk more about in serology than you are with me. So what do we need to worry about with our specimen collection for protein?
Temperature.
Temperature, so you don't want to collect it and then stick it in the microwave, right? Okay. What else will affect your total protein analysis? Lipemia, right? And how do we get rid of the lipemia in your specimen?
Ultracentrifugation.
Ultracentrifugation. Get rid of it. Correct. So temperature is very important, so we want to keep it in the refrigerator versus just leaving it at room temperature where it can get too hot. Yes. Lunch. And then when you come back from lunch, half of you will do total protein, half of you are going to work. I can't, that still won't work. I'm still going to try every single day just in the hopes that this gremlin is going to get out of here and it is going to come alive. So I might just, wing in there, hey, everybody, it's working today. We're all going to just look at it.
Do they do different things?
I'm sorry?
Do they do different things?
They do not do different things. They just, and they actually don't do them differently. That one just requires you to do more, where this one is more put it on, push it. So it's really a good in between these two.